Hi students, it's Arthur, and we're going to now start moving into the resume section of Business 206. So this is one of the core areas of the course, as we've talked about before, and I'll talk about the assignments in a moment. This is the first video in the resume series, and what we're going to do is cover the following topics in this video. What is a resume and why is it important? What should it include? How long should it be? And what should it look like, principally, before we move into talking about the details on how to complete it. There are two assignments that are related to our resume in this class. The first of which is we want to see a first draft of your resume. I'll tell you too that you'll notice there's no dates on here or points. Check Canvas for your assignment due date and the point value for the semester. So the first draft resume assignment is part 1 of 2 for the resumes in this course. Both assignments together constitute a very high percentage of the total score potential in the course. So be mindful about that. The first draft actually is and has a meaningful score for this course. The final draft, not this one, is the mandatory assignment, and you'll see that in a moment. The other thing we're going to be looking for here is we want you to submit the document as a Word file. A PDF submission will not get penalized, perhaps just a frustration comment for me. The thing that we want to see here and why I want it as a Word file is if I do see something unusual about the formatting, I can actually open the file and take a look at it and see what is going on so that I can make a much more informed recommendation as to how to fix it. And the other thing I'll talk to you too, as you'll notice here, is it says a file name related to your name. Routinely, I get resumes from students that just says resume or some variation of that. But ultimately, this is a resume. The resume is a document you're going to be sending to people. So word it in something that will make it easily found in the future and also make it easier for me too. So the kind of best practice is to use your name, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So the rubric, just like every other assignment that we have, is shown here, and a couple of things that I really want to focus on for the resume. So one thing that we really want to focus on and where students kind of go sideways really is around these things. Students usually submit older or template-based resumes, which quite frankly, quite often receive a low score. And the reason for that is they don't follow the course recommendations. They just grab the resume, they don't pay attention to what's going on in class and use the recommendations we make to update it for the first draft. Honestly, I mean, it's worth, in this particular case, you can see here it's worth 30 points. The final draft resume is worth 50. It's a big deal to screw this one up. So highly recommend you pay attention to this. You'll end up doing the work anyway after my feedback. So it's better to get it right the first time to maximize points. So some of the things that students do, as well as the older or template-based resumes, they don't follow course recommendations, as I said. Unapproved templates from the internet, particularly 2-column resume formats, which typically are the main problem. But other issues are just poor formatting overall or structure, and unusually, lots of grammar and spelling issues. What's really frustrating about that is this is a document that's supposed to be marketing you, and it's quite honestly the first thing, or maybe the only thing, a company or hiring manager has to understand what your communication skills are like. The resume is one of the most important documents you'll ever create in your career for job search. And if you don't get this right, well, that tells some people some pretty loud and telling things about you and your attention to detail. The other thing is poor bullets that are task-oriented versus showing the value you create. We talk a lot about that in this particular subject. Using first-person pronouns is a no-no. So I, my, me, we. Definitely don't use any of these in the resume. A resume is supposed to be what we call implied first person. So you're going to use a very similar language as if you said, I did this. But what you're essentially going to do is you're going to eliminate the word itself, and then the rest of the sentence may actually work or will likely work with a little bit of rewording. The other thing is a rambling narrative rather than a concise, quantitative or qualitative bullet. And then formatting dates and sections consistently and appropriately is something that we see routinely as issues on student resumes. So as I said before, you're going to end up doing the work anyway after my feedback, so better to get it right the first time. So on the file name point, the final point I'll make here is it should be either last name, first name, resume, such as Smith, Bill, resume. Or you can obviously switch the first name and last name, but something similar to that is very highly recommended because you never know how and when the document will be shared. So the final draft is actually pretty easy in terms of this. Basically, we're going to grade you exactly the same, with the exception of the fact that we want to see that the recommendations or feedback that you receive from the first draft is incorporated into the final draft so that you go from good to great, hopefully. Again, this is one of the 3 mandatory assignments, so if you do not turn this assignment in, your maximum grade automatically defaults to a D as in dog. Obviously worse, depending on the point penalty that you see with this too. With your final draft, a Word document is still preferred, but still no penalty for submitting as a PDF. And with this, you'll notice the only real difference in the rubric here is the number of points, first of all. But secondly, it's a notice basically to say I'm going to grade in the same way. The rubric is the same. The only difference is I'm going to penalize fairly hard if you if you simply resubmit your previous version. And by the way, I do check. So as we start in the resume, I want to really focus on this again to make sure that you understand this is a marketing document and this is a communication to someone. This is not about you, this is about them. They are making a decision to hire or not hire you based on all of the things that we're going to be talking about in the course, and of course in this particular subject, the resume. So remember, your audience is them, not you. So in the module resources, I want to focus on this a little bit. There are a lot of resources available in this particular package. And it's going to look a little different because a video will be added here at the top. But otherwise, first thing I want to talk about is the Career Success Hub and CSB resources. So the Success Hub we talked about before as being an online Canvas course, self-paced course. And there's some good information in there about resume construction. So I recommend that you follow that. In addition to that, there are very specific resources from the Career Success Center and the Cameron School of Business, which there are links here shown, common resume mistakes that are made, how to format your resume, those kinds of things, which should be very helpful to you. In addition to that, there's a resume checklist. And this checklist we usually use in class when we have in-class sessions for the summer session, which we're doing asynchronously. You should go and download the checklist because the checklist will be one of the things that we use to kind of visually check to see if everything is covered so that your resume will score the best it possibly can. Next area I want to focus your attention to is the templates. I talk about not using online templates, and one of the things you can do instead is use the templates that UNCW supplies to you. There are 3 levels: beginning, developing, and student resume, and I'll talk a little bit more about them further into this presentation. With respect to resume writing, I've provided a lot of resources as well. The first one is going to highlight a long list, 178 action verbs, of various styles to help you craft compelling bullets that show your value, not just the stuff you do. So if you're struggling with coming up with different types of action verbs, this is the tool for you. Just go here, download this file, and it'll give you a lot of examples that you can use instead of sort of the standard ones that you might just normally think of. It's important you don't keep repeating the same action verb over and over. In addition to that, we really want to focus on creating value generated or value showing bullets versus tasks performed. Most student resumes, and in fact many resumes, not just student resumes, have just a list of tasks, things that you do. It sort of looks like a job description, which they think, oh, well, I'll just match the job description. That's not what a hiring manager is looking for, and we'll talk much more about that in detail as we go. Additionally, we'll talk a little bit about using AI in writing too. Finally, one of the issues that I mentioned earlier is about formatting, and here are a couple of articles, an article and a video, which will help you with creating the right kind of alignment and spacing in your resume. So make sure that you follow the guidelines, and if you're struggling with it, come back here and take a look at the resources. The video is a very short one, the article is quite a short one as well. And both of them can help you understand how to use tabs and create the kind of spacing that you need for a very good looking resume. So we talked about the questions for resume, and one thing I want to highlight here is TABSA students or foreign students who are here for 1 or 2 semesters. You have the option to write the resume in a US-based format, or you can choose your local standard, such as a Euro CV if you're from Europe. I'm not going to penalize those students that choose to use a different format. You just need to let me know what you want me to grade against. Formatting is going to be different for these other types of resumes, and we're going to focus very, very much and only actually on the US structure. So if you have a request to have me look at it using a different structure, please reach out and let me know. The resume is a very important part of the job search process. And in fact, this is where you get the opportunity to make a great first impression, or not, in the case of a poorly written resume. Most people don't spend enough time developing and targeting this document. As I said, they spend time thinking, okay, well, what did I do? And they write those things down, which essentially becomes a list of tasks. That's not optimizing a resume. In addition to that, they'll write a generic resume and not customize it for the role they're applying to. That's also a big mistake that students and other professionals make. A resume, as I said, is a tool to make a great first impression, and the objective of a resume is to get a conversation, to get invited to the discussion, to get invited to the game. Because ultimately, you'll never get chosen for a job based on your resume. Your resume just gets you through that door. When I talk about resumes, what I like to do, and you've heard me say this before, calling it a marketing document, and that's exactly what this is. You need to think of yourself as the product that we're marketing, and you want someone to choose you, or buy you, if you will, or invest in you for their company to create value for the hiring manager in the company. We're hiring you so that you can create value for the organization. That's the key. If you can demonstrate to me that you can create value through your previous experiences and your academic career, that's what we're looking for. And I want you to think about this as you as a product and think about features and benefits. People don't buy features. They buy the benefits, their perception of value of the product they purchase. So in your case, features are going to be the skills and qualifications you have, the experiences you have, the degree program that you're in, the skills that you possess and have learned through your academic career. I'm not buying those things from you. I'm buying what those things can do for me. And the best thing that you can do is to demonstrate to me, communicate to me, connect the dots for me about what you've done to create value in the organizations and companies that you've worked for and you volunteered for, and your success in academic endeavors and projects that you've been engaged in. So we want to see accomplishments, results generated, and why you are there. What I mean by that is what you can do for me once you're here. So a competent resume is a very, very strong communication tool that markets you for the job with an effective summary and objective. It shows skills and demonstrated accomplishments to create value for an organization, and it will help to determine if you're qualified for the role and how effective a communicator you are. As I said, this is the first example of communications that I can get from you that I can actually see and examine. And additionally, it will help guide our interview and discussion process from both sides. You can use your resume as you go through this to help you answer questions, to kind of be there as a reminder for how you want to share your experiences in such a way and through your stories that are going to demonstrate that you can be a valuable employee for the hiring manager. It also serves as a reminder for both sides. So both of us will be taking this document and using it throughout the entire process. The hiring manager in the organization will have this document and using it to compare you against the other candidates. So remember, this is something that is going to be part of your competitive package of deliverables that hopefully you can demonstrate what kind of employee you're going to be. You may hear that resumes are only viewed for 6 or 7 seconds. That's not literally true, but the fact is that companies get hundreds of resumes for every job, and recruiters actually do scan them, but they don't actually read them. They'll scan them very quickly, and they'll make a decision about them, or disposition them is another word, where they're going to say a yes or no pile. They might have a maybe pile as well. So how can you stand out amongst that kind of competition where you have hundreds of people applying for the same job that you are? Well, poor resume is certainly not going to get you there. A poor resume will often have one or more of these issues. Wrong or missing contact info. Believe it or not, a lot of resumes don't have complete contact info for the individual, which to me is mind-blowing, but we see it very routinely. I've already mentioned, but poor grammar or spelling mistakes, death knell for a resume. Unprofessional email addresses, weirdly enough, is a thing where people have, they've created their email address based on maybe a nickname or some funny saying or something like that. Definitely create a brand new email address using Gmail, preferably, or Outlook, as to kind of show you're kind of up to date with technology, so to speak. An old email address, which you shouldn't have as students most likely. Something like a Yahoo email address or something like that. Definitely says something about you, so you want to make sure that's not an issue, and make sure it's just a professional email address like first initial, last name, something like that. That would be easy to remember and easy to use for you. A cluttered and crowded layout with little white space looks like a very dense document and is very hard to read. This is definitely something that will impact you negatively in the screening process. The reason for that comes back to that same issue that we've been talking about in terms of communications and what kind of a communicator you are in your written style. Now let's look at good resumes and what they look like. So a good resume will deliver your value proposition and definitely improve your odds for getting that conversation with them to get that interview. One of these things that we want to see is a very clear, simple, and logical layout. And that's why we use the templates that we use for the university, and we'll show you them on these next couple of slides here shortly. Show quantifiable results. Now, you may not have a position or have had roles where you can demonstrate quantifiable results, but you can probably talk through things that you've done at an organization to improve a process, deal with a crisis, deal with a difficult customer. All of these things are transferable skills, and you want to show not only the fact that you've dealt with that difficult customer, but what was the context in that situation, and then what did you do, and what was the result that you achieved through managing this difficult situation. That's what we talk about quantifiable results. It could be qualitative and not quantitative, and that's okay, given where you are in your career. But as you continue to progress and get older and get more experience, more of your bullets should definitely be quantifiable, although qualitative is still great. It should include elements of personal branding, and in some cases, a branding statement. It's not an objective statement. That's the key thing. here. So we're looking for a profile or a summary statement of who you are. We're not looking for what is now an antiquated style of writing an objective statement. In addition to that, we don't want to see something like references upon request. Those are really old style resumes, and if we see that, then it just triggers us, because that's not a modern style that we're looking for. And then finally, of course, going along with the clear, simple, logical layout is clear, legible fonts. So now we start moving into the resume and its structure. So what should I include? So this first resume here is the beginning resume, and we'll kind of use this throughout, but we'll show you what the other resumes look like as well. So the first thing, though, we're going to talk about is the resume real estate. So these are sort of the 6 things that we want to see on a resume. First of all, it's going to be your name and contact details. Occasionally you will hear this term as a header, because it used to be that people used to put this information in the header of the document. I don't like to use the word header, although I still use it from time to time, because I want to emphasize here that the header is not the document header. And in fact, we do not want you to put your contact information into the header of your resume. And we also don't want any important information in the footer of your resume. And the reason for that is most applicant tracking systems, when you submit your resume through these systems, and we'll talk about that here in a moment, don't read the information that's in, or doesn't parse the information out of the information in the header or footer. So it could be they'll pull in your resume, but none of your contact information may get pulled in to that particular applicant tracking system, or ATS system. So make sure the name and contact details is actually in the body of the document, not in the header. Of course, we want to have dates across most topics. You don't need them for everything, but we do like to see them for the majority of the topics. And you'll notice how the dates vary a little bit in terms of the expectation between the education section to the work experience. Education, we only want to see your graduation date. For most other situations and sections, we want to see a start and end date. So education should be first for you on a student or early career resume. Early career is defined kind of up to maybe 5 years, certainly up to 2 or 3. Coursework and project experience related to education should be tucked in with the education section. You can actually have an added section that says relevant coursework underneath education and before work experience if you wish, or as I said, you can just tuck it into the education section. Work experience, of course, is very important, and we want to see your positions. And we'll talk much more about the bullets, but you can kind of see here from the example, we would definitely want a structure that shows us not only the tasks you performed, how you did it, and why you did it, and any results that came about from that. The why is the most important, and you need to understand why you're doing what you're doing, not just the task that you're performing. And then finally, we definitely want to see your activity and your engagement. Leadership positions, service that you're performing, either in an organization or volunteer work. And an interests or skills section is generally desirable, but in this case, we don't want to see fluffy, soft skills in here. So communication skills, problem-solving skills, those kinds of things and those kinds of words are very generic and can be said by anybody. So here we want to focus on more technical skills, certifications, but you need to make sure you don't embellish in any of these sections, because you will come back to bite you. So the template here, you'll notice that the basic one was there. This is the developing resume. So I'll go back to the basic and just or the beginning resume and talk about this. So this is typically a sophomore or junior student with no intern experience and little to no involvement or engagement in organizations. This is going to be the simplest format, and it's a good one to start with if you're, as I said, don't have a whole lot of experience yet or any courses that you've taken that are relevant to your major. The developing resume is sort of a tweener and is typically a junior or senior with some relevant experience, perhaps an internship as well. And they're starting to take relevant coursework and have maybe project-based work as well mixed in. Students here typically are quite involved, including leadership roles. The experienced resume is for typically a junior or senior, but usually with much more experience, relevant experience, or internships. They probably have taken significant higher level coursework, perhaps have certification or technical skills that they've learned either in class or through additional education, and typically have strong engagement and leadership involvement as well. One thing I want to mention here is military students. And if you are a military, ex-military, or in your military today, your resume could be longer because you probably have more experience that is potentially relevant to the roles you're going to be looking for. And we certainly want to highlight the activities that you're doing as a military veteran. And so experience can be included in the experience section, or you could separate it out underneath work experience by having a section called military experience, for example. So if you have any questions, if you're sort of in this category or another category that perhaps I haven't mentioned and you want some clarification, just reach out and we'll talk about it. The next question is really about how many pages should it be, and does it matter what it looks like? And I think we've already talked about the doesn't matter what it looks like already quite a bit, and we'll touch on it a bit more in a second. So first of all, how many pages? The flippant answer that I normally give is the resume is only needs to be as long as it needs to be to communicate your message. So that's what we're going to be looking for in this particular case. But for students, the rule of thumb is generally 1 page. We usually stick to the 1 page, even up to early career professionals, as I've mentioned before. And so that should be your target. And we'll talk about how to kind of massage your resume to fit those requirements. Again, if you had military experience or lots of accomplishments and involvement, maybe you're a late career, or not late career, but you've started your university career late, maybe in your late 20s or even older, your resume certainly can be longer, and we may not start with education as well. So there's always exceptions to every rule, but if you're a student in the organization, it's pretty standard. You should focus on 1 page. And of course, format. Does that really matter? Well, let's talk about that now. So these are 2 examples of resumes that, not exact copies, but typical examples of some resumes that I've gotten even from students. So which of you believe that these are okay or friendly, as we like to call it, ATS friendly, and should be no problem in uploading to a company's applicant tracking system? Well, if you said both of them are not, that's probably a safe assumption. It may not be exactly the case, but ultimately when we're talking about these kinds of resumes, 2-column resumes are dangerous for you to use. In addition to that, pictures are definitely not used in standard resumes today. So anytime you have a picture, and this picture is a horrible one, by the way, for a work resume, generally speaking, but what we want to see here is a more standard format. So anytime you're starting to use these kinds of resumes, they typically come from external templates because most people don't create this from scratch. So if you're using an external template, that creates an opening for lots of potential problems because you're not sure how these are created or formatted. And particularly when you're using, because you can download resume templates from Canva, for instance, those are absolutely horrible because they don't save as a text document, they save as a graphic document. So Canva resumes are normally not ATS friendly and they cannot be read as a text document by ATS systems. Now, will that change with the advent of AI? Probably so. It's just that we won't know if a company has made that change, and it's going to take many years before companies invest in upgrading their systems because that costs money. And companies aren't willing just to upgrade willy-nilly. There has to be a payoff or a return on investment for that. So it's not likely all companies will invest in that for quite some time. So the other thing is what kind of document should you have? I mentioned the Word document, and Word is the standard document, or the standard application, I should say, that you should be using. Don't use Google Docs, don't use Pages. Those documents can, if you're trying to upload those, most ATS systems cannot deal with either of those two documents. Now you could create it in Google Docs or Pages and create a PDF, but as I said, it can potentially create problems as well, depending on how those save as a PDF. You have to save a PDF as a text-based document, not a graphic-based, and so there's a little bit of nuance when you're creating a PDF that you may not be aware of. And if you're using it in Word and you save as a PDF, you can guarantee that Word will treat that properly and it will be readable by an ATS system. ATS, and what does it mean to be friendly or compliant? So, first of all, the applicant tracking system is essentially an electronic filing cabinet for your resume and other documents that they need to manage for their employee hiring process, whether it be internal candidates or external candidates. And you should know that pretty much every company uses some sort of ATS system. Small companies may have a very small system, or it could be even an Excel-based system, but still they use it to track applicants coming through their organization. Some best practices, you'll hear some conflicting information out there, but most ATSs today, they can handle basic formatting that you can do in Word. So borders, shading, colored text, and any kind of normal formatting are typically okay to use in your resume. We recommend sans serif fonts, and if you don't know what that is, here's an example. Serif fonts typically have the squigglies, so you can see that on these three ABC characters, kind of what the squigglies are highlighted in yellow. A sans serif font basically means it doesn't have those little squigglies, and so it looks cleaner. It is the safest to use, but you want to be sure that you're using a standard format that's available in Word, or a standard font, I should say, that's available in Word, and don't use downloadable fonts. They may look pretty, but it could be that they're not being read properly by the ATS system because, again, you're not sure where those fonts necessarily come from. So it's better safe to use the stock fonts, and there's plenty enough in Word that you can find something that looks nice. Graphics are okay, but know that they won't be read by the ATS system. So if there's important information in there that you want to include, I don't mind. I think you can use graphics, but just understand that it's likely any information included in that graphic will just be ignored by the ATS system. And the other thing you want to be careful about is how you create your spacing. And sometimes that creating that space, a lot of people will use tables, or they'll use spaces to actually create spacing. And sometimes that can create problems when your information from your resume is being imported into the ATS system. So it's quite better to use the formatting functionality within Word, such as tabs and justification, to get the spacing that you're looking for. Things to avoid, basically we talked about headers and footers. Text boxes are treated the same as a graphic, so whatever tag you have in that text box will not be read. Spaces, as I said, to adjust spacings can create some issues with how the information is parsed. Templates, even if they are Word templates, highly recommend that you do not use those. And multiple row tables. So one way to create some formatting, particularly for lists like skills, that you want to have a sort of a multi-column list. Typically a one-row, multiple-column table will work, but there's a little bit of nuance to it. So if you want to use that, please reach out and ask me, and I'll show you how to do that. So the psychology of reading resumes is kind of where we're going to finish this little bit long video. We've done plenty of research on how people read resumes. Now, part of the research is going to be obvious because this is how most resumes are constructed. But the reason we want to show this is that most people read resumes, and most things actually, in sort of an F motion. Read obviously left to right, top to bottom. And so that's why the resume is rigidly structured as it is. Of course, it's history, but it's also science, because we take advantage of how people typically read documents. So if it's not in this format, such as a multi-column resume, some people will get uncomfortable. So as much as I hate to say this kind of thing, sometimes it's best to make it for the masses, unless you really want to stand out, which is okay, but just make sure you're okay that you might stand out for the wrong reason, and it may eliminate you from consideration. So just remember, format does matter, and following the standard format is the safest method so that you don't accidentally or unintentionally eliminate yourself from the process with a poorly formatted resume. Ultimately, what we're going to do now is just to finish up with a close on a couple of key topics. So we talked about using Word or a PDF for submissions, one full page, nothing in the header or footer. White space is important and consistent. And one of the things I talk about here is margins. And you can see with the 2 lines I've just added, we want to see good even margins on both the left and right side. In addition to that, font style and size are consistent. You can use 2 different fonts in a resume. Just make sure that you're using them consistently throughout. And that bullets and dates are consistently aligned. That the bullets all align with each other north to south or top to bottom on a page, and the dates are consistently aligned wherever you have them, but I would recommend that they are right justified using a right tab. Speaking of that, you can use the resources, the module resources that I've talked about before. There's a video and article in there that I showed with that black arrow that will tell you how to format it in this format if you're not using the templates provided. I talked about the checklist, and this is what the checklist looks like. Please use this, download it and use it, and kind of check off this to see that everything that you should be doing, you are doing. If you're actually co-located with another student, take a look at each other's resumes and help each other and kind of grade each other's resumes. Somebody else might see something that you don't. Also, you could give this to your parents or siblings or some other family member for them to take a look at your resume and use this checklist as well as the rubric to ensure your success on this assignment and the final resume. All right, that's it for the first in the series of resumes for you. I appreciate your time on this little bit longer video and look forward to talking to you in the next module.